It begins with a kind of silence that most people misunderstand. Not because a man has stopped caring, but because his emotions have become too strong to put into words. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt there was something they wanted to say but could never explain? If you have, then what you are about to hear may connect pieces that never made sense before. A man who is emotionally attached does not always admit it openly. He does not always become romantic. He does not always know how to describe what keeps repeating inside his heart when no one is watching. Yet there is one powerful behavior that almost always appears when his emotions become deeply connected to someone. Once you notice it, you will never think about emotional attachment in the same way again. Because the truth is simple. When a man becomes emotionally attached, he slowly starts revealing parts of himself that almost nobody else gets to see. Stay with me because the next part explains why this happens in ways that surprise most people. The answer is not as obvious as many expect, and it changes the way you read someone's actions forever. Many people misunderstand how men experience emotions. They expect attachment to look loud and easy to recognize. They expect endless messages, dramatic love stories, or constant affection. But the way many men process emotions is much more complicated than that. From a young age, many are taught to hide vulnerability before they ever learn how to understand it. They grow up believing they should stay calm, stay logical, stay strong no matter what happens inside. Because of this, emotional attachment often appears through actions long before it appears through words. A man may look completely composed while fighting an emotional storm that nobody else can see. That is why emotionally aware people pay attention to patterns instead of promises. They notice energy instead of only listening to words. They watch what keeps happening over time. And there is one behavior that appears again and again when a man is emotionally attached. It is not perfection. It is not obsession. It is not constant communication. It is consistency. That quiet emotional consistency tells a story words often cannot. Keep watching, because this single idea explains many confusing situations people experience in relationships. When a man becomes emotionally attached, someone's emotional presence slowly becomes part of his everyday inner world. Even when he becomes quiet, even when work becomes stressful, even when life feels heavy or fear clouds his judgment, something inside him keeps returning to that person. His attention may move away for a while, but emotionally, it always finds its way back. This is where many people become confused. They assume emotionally attached men always chase with confidence. But real attachment often creates the opposite reaction in the beginning. A man who feels something meaningful may suddenly become more careful, more thoughtful, more observant. Why does this happen? Because emotional attachment creates emotional risk. And whenever something becomes valuable, the possibility of losing it suddenly feels real. For someone who has spent years protecting himself from rejection, disappointment, or emotional pain, this can feel overwhelming. Suddenly, the connection matters. Suddenly, the possibility of losing someone feels personal. Suddenly, vulnerability is no longer just an idea. It becomes real. And that changes the way he behaves in ways he may not even understand himself. When emotions grow stronger, hidden parts of a person's inner world often begin to appear without permission. A man starts thinking about someone during ordinary moments. He remembers details that usually disappear from his memory. He notices small changes in their mood, their voice, even the way they go quiet. Their absence starts affecting him in ways he cannot fully explain. Even if he tries to appear emotionally distant, his unconscious behavior quietly reveals what his words continue to hide. This is why emotionally attached men often become protective of the connection itself, not controlling, not unhealthy, simply protective. They begin caring about whether someone feels safe, whether they seem tired, whether something is bothering them. Another person's emotional state slowly begins influencing his own. And that change is important because when someone else's emotions consistently affect a man's inner peace, attachment has already taken root beneath the surface. He may never announce it. He may never even realize it completely. But his actions begin speaking for him, and the next sign becomes even more difficult to ignore, so don't miss what comes next. One of the most interesting things about emotionally attached men is that physical distance does not always create emotional distance. He may disappear for a while, but emotionally he remains connected. It could be a simple message, a quiet check-in, bringing up a conversation from weeks ago that you assumed he had forgotten, a casual question that secretly carries concern. These moments happen because emotional attachment creates a continuing connection inside the mind. Even during silence, the relationship keeps moving forward internally. He may throw himself into work, stay busy with responsibilities, focus on routines, or convince himself to move on. But men who become deeply attached rarely stop thinking about the person who changed something inside them. This is where many women become emotionally exhausted. They mistake withdrawal for complete emotional absence. Yet those two things are not always the same. Sometimes a man pulls away because he feels nothing. But sometimes he becomes quiet because he feels far more than he knows how to manage. And understanding that difference changes everything. The next reason explains why this emotional conflict becomes so difficult to escape. Many men carry emotional weight in complete silence. They learn how to solve problems. They learn how to survive pressure. But very few are taught how to express emotional vulnerability without feeling exposed. So when genuine attachment finally enters their life, an internal struggle begins. One part of them wants closeness. Another part fears depending too much on someone else. One side longs for connection. The other worries about losing control. These opposite emotions can exist at the same time, creating confusing behavior that sends mixed signals to the people they care about. He may move closer one day and seem distant the next. He may speak openly during one conversation and become unusually quiet during another. None of this automatically proves love, and it certainly does not excuse unhealthy behavior. But it can explain why deep emotions sometimes create hesitation instead of confidence. Real emotional attachment is often quieter than people expect. It grows through repeated care, emotional consistency, and the simple fact that even after time passes, his thoughts continue finding their way back to the same person. And if you have ever experienced that pattern, then you already know why some silences speak louder than words. Internal conflict often creates behavior that feels confusing from the outside. One moment he seems deeply connected. The next moment he appears emotionally distant. But when the attachment is real, one important pattern stays the same beneath all those changes. He keeps coming back emotionally. His attention naturally finds its way back to you because real emotional attachment creates a strong pull that is difficult to ignore. People remember where they feel understood, and feeling emotionally understood is incredibly meaningful for many men. Some go through years without ever feeling truly seen. The world often expects them to stay strong without asking what they are carrying inside. They become providers, protectors, problem solvers. Yet many quietly feel emotionally empty beneath the surface. Then someone comes along who makes them feel safe without expecting them to constantly prove themselves. That changes something deep inside. Their mind begins to relax. Their emotional walls slowly come down. Without realizing it, they begin connecting peace with that person's presence. Stay with me because the next part explains why this changes the way they communicate forever, and most people completely miss it. Instead of saying, "I need you," emotionally attached men often reveal themselves in much quieter ways. They slowly invite you into parts of their inner world that almost nobody else gets to see. They begin sharing thoughts they normally keep hidden. They become curious about how you think and how you feel. They remember little details because emotional attachment naturally sharpens their attention. Things that once seemed unimportant suddenly become meaningful because they are connected to someone who now matters deeply. Perhaps the clearest sign appears during difficult moments instead of easy ones. Anyone can be warm when everything feels exciting, but real emotional attachment becomes visible during stress, disagreement, or emotional discomfort. Watch what happens after conflict. Does he disappear forever, or does he eventually return to rebuild the connection? That answer often says more than beautiful words ever could. People who are genuinely attached usually struggle to remain emotionally disconnected for long periods. Even when pride tries to hold them back, something inside keeps pulling them toward repair. Keep watching, because understanding this one difference can completely change how you interpret emotional silence. Pride has quietly ended countless meaningful relationships. This is especially true for people who were taught that showing emotion meant showing weakness. Sometimes a deeply attached man becomes silent, not because he has stopped caring, but because admitting how much he cares feels frightening. The stronger the attachment grows, the more emotionally exposed he feels. Suddenly, your opinion matters more than he expected. Your absence feels heavier than before. The thought of rejection reaches places inside him that he spent years protecting. So he hesitates, he overthinks, he chooses his steps carefully. Yet genuine attachment eventually appears through behavior, whether he intends it or not. You notice it in the way he listens more carefully when you speak. You notice it when your distance quietly changes his mood. You notice it when he tries to understand your pain even while struggling to explain his own. Emotionally attached men often become more attentive in small, almost invisible ways, and those small moments matter because real attachment usually grows quietly long before anyone gives it a name. Don't click away yet, because the next part explains why these feelings can transform someone from the inside out. There is something about deep emotional attachment that cannot always be explained by logic alone. Certain people awaken forgotten parts of us. Their presence brings back hidden kindness, old fears, unresolved pain, and unexpected hope, all at the same time. That is why powerful emotional connections can feel both beautiful and frightening. They force people to face parts of themselves they have avoided for years. Many men are not prepared for the emotional reflection that real attachment creates. When a man becomes deeply attached, he often begins noticing his own emotional struggles. He realizes where vulnerability feels difficult. He sees how afraid he is of depending on someone. He becomes aware of old emotional wounds he believed had already disappeared. The relationship becomes more than a connection with another person. It becomes a journey of self-discovery. That journey can change him completely, or it can make him want to run away at first. Not because the connection means too little, but because it means far too much. Deep emotions ask difficult questions, and not everyone feels ready to answer them. People rarely fear shallow emotions. They fear the deep ones because deep emotions always bring real consequences. They challenge the way we see ourselves. They uncover old pain. They ask for honesty that many people have avoided for years. That is why patience matters when trying to understand emotional attachment. Not the kind of patience that accepts disrespect or unhealthy behavior, but the kind that understands people are complicated. Emotionally attached men still carry past experiences, insecurities, fears, disappointments, and emotional scars. Attachment does not suddenly make someone emotionally perfect. Sometimes it simply begins the slow process of becoming more emotionally aware. That may be why deeply attached men often become unexpectedly gentle, not weak, gentle. There is an important difference. Their voice becomes softer around the person they truly care about. Their reactions become more thoughtful. They choose their words more carefully because hurting someone they value becomes something they genuinely want to avoid. Even very confident men often reveal quiet tenderness when emotional attachment becomes strong enough. And what happens next surprises almost everyone. There is another side of emotional attachment that few people openly discuss. Deep feelings can also make a man emotionally restless because attachment creates vulnerability, and vulnerability removes certainty. Suddenly he cares deeply about outcomes he cannot fully control. He starts wondering whether he will be understood, whether the connection will last, whether opening his heart will eventually lead to pain. These thoughts can make him seem uncertain even when his feelings are completely real. His mind begins searching for safety while his heart keeps moving toward closeness. That is why emotionally attached men sometimes send mixed signals without meaning to. Their emotions pull them forward while their fears quietly hold them back. Understanding this does not mean ignoring unhealthy behavior, but it does explain why strong emotional bonds often look more complicated than people expect. Beneath the silence, beneath the hesitation, beneath every careful step, one truth usually remains. His emotional attention keeps finding its way back to the person who made him feel understood. And when that pattern continues over time, it often reveals far more than words ever could. When a man becomes deeply attached, he often finds himself thinking about things he cannot fully control. That is why emotionally attached men sometimes overthink conversations, long silences, small changes in behavior, and tiny emotional shifts that other people barely notice. Their mind becomes highly alert to anything that might suggest distance or possible loss. And the fear of losing someone they truly care about is often much stronger than they are willing to admit. You may notice him quietly checking your emotional energy without making it obvious. He asks simple questions that seem casual but carry deeper meaning. He pays attention to your mood. He notices when your tone changes. He tries to sense whether the emotional connection between you still feels the same. This is because many emotionally attached men look for reassurance in ways people do not always recognize. They are not always searching for romantic words. Sometimes reassurance comes from emotional stability, from peaceful conversations, from feeling accepted without having to constantly prove themselves. Keep watching, because this next idea explains why past experiences can completely change the way a man loves, and most people never see it happening. Everything becomes even more complicated when a man has experienced emotional pain before. A broken heart can quietly reshape the way someone approaches every future relationship. A man who has been deeply hurt may long for closeness while fearing it at the exact same time. He wants connection, yet another part of him prepares for disappointment before anything has even gone wrong. He hopes for love while expecting loss. Unless he begins facing these hidden fears, they often appear again and again in every important relationship. The same patterns repeat, the same worries return, the same emotional walls quietly rise whenever things begin to feel real. Lasting emotional growth only happens when someone chooses to face those fears instead of letting them control every decision. Eventually, every emotionally attached man reaches an important moment. He must decide whether to keep protecting himself forever or accept the risk that comes with emotional honesty. Stay with me, because that single decision often determines whether a meaningful connection grows stronger or slowly fades away. Every lasting relationship eventually asks the same difficult question. Will you stay emotionally guarded, or will you allow yourself to be truly known? Love without vulnerability often becomes little more than a performance, and emotional attachment without courage can slowly turn into silent suffering. Many men live inside that silent struggle far longer than anyone realizes. They care deeply but cannot find the right words. They feel connected but fear becoming emotionally exposed. They want real closeness but become anxious when that closeness finally arrives. Behind behavior that looks confusing from the outside often lives a frightened inner world that very few people ever get to see. That hidden struggle explains why someone may care deeply while appearing uncertain. It does not excuse unhealthy behavior, but it reminds us that human emotions are rarely simple. Some of the strongest feelings remain completely invisible until they finally begin shaping everyday actions. And what happens when healing begins is something that can completely change the direction of a person's life. As healing slowly takes place, something remarkable begins to happen. Emotionally attached men stop treating their emotions like problems that must always be hidden. They begin understanding that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of honesty. Little by little, they stop running from meaningful connections. They learn how to stay emotionally present even when conversations become uncomfortable. Instead of escaping difficult feelings, they become willing to face them. That change creates a different kind of strength. A mature man, does not create emotional confusion wherever he goes. He creates emotional safety. And emotional safety has become one of the rarest gifts in modern relationships. It means you no longer feel afraid of being judged simply for being human. You no longer worry that sadness, fear, tenderness, uncertainty, or honest emotion will be used against you. Real emotional safety allows both people to relax instead of constantly protecting themselves. Don't miss the final point, because this is where everything you've heard starts coming together. When emotional safety becomes part of a relationship, both people begin lowering the walls they spent years building. Conversations become more honest. Silence becomes less frightening. Small misunderstandings no longer feel like the end of everything because trust slowly replaces fear. This is often what emotionally attached men are searching for, even when they cannot explain it clearly. They want a place where they do not have to pretend to be perfect. A place where strength and vulnerability can exist together. A place where they are accepted without constantly proving their value. That kind of connection cannot be built through dramatic words alone. It grows through steady actions, repeated trust, emotional consistency, and the quiet decision to keep showing up even when life becomes difficult. In the end, the strongest sign of emotional attachment is rarely loud or dramatic. It is found in the man who keeps returning with care, who continues choosing the connection, and who slowly learns that real closeness is not something to fear, but something worth protecting. And once you recognize that quiet pattern, you begin seeing emotional attachment in a completely different way. When someone feels emotionally safe, they no longer believe they must hide every feeling or constantly prove their worth. They feel accepted for who they are instead of what they can always do. And when a man becomes deeply attached, whether he realizes it or not, he begins craving that kind of emotional safety more than almost anything else. That is why one powerful pattern keeps showing up. Emotional consistency, even during emotional distance. Even through confusion, he finds his way back emotionally. Even through fear, he reconnects. Even after long periods of silence, something inside him keeps reaching toward the connection again. Real attachment creates invisible emotional ties that are much stronger than simple logic. Maybe you have experienced this yourself. Someone who always found another reason to reconnect. Someone whose emotional presence never completely disappeared from your life. Someone who still remembered your feelings and your world even after weeks or months of silence. Those moments are rarely meaningless. People naturally move toward what changes them emotionally. But stay with me, because the next point is one many people misunderstand, and it can completely change how you see emotional attachment. Real emotional attachment should never become an excuse for unhealthy behavior. This is one of the most important things to remember. Genuine attachment must eventually grow into emotional responsibility. Love is not only about strong feelings, it is also about showing up. It is effort. It is honesty. It is taking responsibility for how your actions affect another person. A man who is truly attached will eventually want his behavior to match his emotions. If his actions never reflect what he feels, attachment slowly becomes emotional suffering instead of emotional growth. That is why healthy relationships ask both people to be brave. Brave enough to communicate honestly. Brave enough to heal old wounds instead of repeating them. Brave enough to stay emotionally open even when nothing feels certain. Lasting connection is not built through perfection. It grows through honesty repeated again and again over time. Keep watching, because the next idea explains why so many people today struggle to experience the closeness they secretly want. The truth is that many people are emotionally hungry while pretending they do not need anyone. They are afraid of looking needy, so they hide genuine attachment. They fear vulnerability, so they act emotionally distant. They fear rejection, so they avoid honest conversations altogether. But no one can stay emotionally disconnected forever without paying a price. Human beings were not created simply to survive life. They were created to build meaningful connections with other people. That is why truly deep relationships feel so life-changing. They wake up forgotten parts of who we are. They uncover old wounds that still need healing. They challenge the emotional masks people wear every day. They reveal just how much loneliness has shaped modern life. For many men especially, emotional attachment becomes the first moment they realize something important. Strength by itself is not enough. Success cannot replace emotional closeness. Achievement cannot replace feeling understood. And pretending to be fine can never replace a real connection with someone who truly sees you. Deep inside, many emotionally attached men still lives a younger version of themselves, quietly hoping to feel emotionally safe enough to love without fear. That younger part matters far more than most people realize. It helps explain why emotionally distant men sometimes become unexpectedly warm with the right person. It explains why guarded men slowly become more thoughtful and emotionally aware. It explains why silence suddenly feels heavy once real attachment has formed. Beneath the confidence, beneath the careful words, beneath every emotional wall, there is often someone who has simply grown tired of protecting themselves all the time. They are still searching for a connection that feels genuine instead of forced. A place where they do not have to pretend. A place where they can simply be themselves. If you are still watching, this next thought brings everything together, and it may completely change the way you recognize emotional attachment from now on. If you ever wonder whether a man is emotionally attached, stop looking only for dramatic gestures or perfect words. Instead, pay attention to emotional patterns over time. Notice whether he keeps returning emotionally. Notice whether your presence continues affecting him even after life creates temporary distance. Emotionally attached men often carry someone in their thoughts long after the conversation ends. Their attention naturally finds its way back because meaningful emotional connections leave lasting marks inside the mind. And perhaps the deepest truth of all is this. Most emotionally attached men are not searching for perfection. They are searching for emotional peace. They want a place where they do not have to wear emotional armor every single day. They want a relationship where silence feels comfortable instead of threatening. They want someone whose presence brings calm instead of constant emotional tension. That kind of connection changes people from the inside out. It softens guarded hearts. It eases hidden loneliness. It teaches wounded people that strength and vulnerability can exist together without canceling each other. Maybe that is why emotionally meaningful love feels so rare today. It asks for something many people have forgotten how to give. Honest emotions, not carefully managed images, not emotional games, not endless guessing. Just two people willing to be real with each other even when it feels uncomfortable. And when a man finally experiences that kind of connection, one clear pattern almost always appears. No matter how guarded he has been, no matter how logical he tries to remain, no matter how carefully he hides what he feels, he keeps returning emotionally, because real attachment is about far more than attraction. It is about the emotional mark someone leaves on your life. The heart remembers the person who made it feel truly understood. So if someone's emotional attention continues finding its way back to you through silence, distance, confusion, or the passing of time, do not ignore what that pattern may be telling you. Sometimes the deepest feelings are never announced with dramatic speeches. They quietly reveal themselves through steady actions, repeated care, and a consistency that no one can fake forever. And that is often where the strongest emotional truth quietly lives.